I'm your host, Nick Giffen, predictive analyst here at Action Network. And joining me, as always, my co-host, Stephen Young of Roto-Grinders, better known as Stevie TPFL. And this week, we're talking bets for the AdventHealth 400 at Kansas Speedway here on Running Hot. Last weekend at Dover, Denny Hamlin called his shot on his Actions Detrimental podcast and took home his third win of the season, using a little bit of air blocking to finish ahead of Kyle Larson, rival Kyle Larson, and his teammate, Denny Hamlin's teammate, Martin Truex Jr., who rounded out the top three. So Denny Hamlin picks up win number 3. That means we hit Denny Hamlin over 2.5 wins, which we gave out on the preseason episode of Running Hot, Stevie. So thoughts on Dover and thoughts on Denny Hamlin this year. Is he the championship favorite?
I would say he's definitely the championship favorite. The track set that we're going to run at is good for him outside of Phoenix. He's got to figure Phoenix out. And I don't even know where like he could necessarily test for Phoenix at this point. So, but I do think he's the championship favorite. I think he has a really high probability to make it into the championship 4 because like we're not even there yet, and like he's just racking up the playoff points. So like the first round for him is going to be a breeze as long as he doesn't have any like serious issues in like back-to-back races or something. So, but overall, I mean, Denny's just having a phenomenal year. Joe Gibbs is having a phenomenal year, and Toyota's having a phenomenal year. So, you know, if it wasn't for like Hendrick Motorsports, it would be a Toyota just smash fest this season. But overall, happy for Denny. It's great to see that. Not happy for NASCAR. Man, you watch the Xfinity race for Dover, and you're like, what a fantastic race. And you watch the Cup race, and you're like, we're air blocking? Like, really? Like, I was frustrated watching that race because, like, it took longer for some of the good cars that were fast to get through the field, and it kind of just seemed like a parade lap once we got going, and they were just kind of running in single file because you couldn't really make the passes. And it's just weird because like Dover is typically a track where we see 2 or 3 grooves and we see a lot of passing. So I don't know what's going on with this car. Like it seems like we get really good races or really like mediocre to bad races. And I don't know, does the good outweigh the bad? I do think the racing has been more exciting than the Gen 7 car, but I think overall, I don't know, man. I like Dover. I like Dover as a racetrack, but it was kind of hard to watch.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was okay. I definitely saw some 2 or 3 wide and some passing, but you're right. It definitely was harder to get through the field. You think about a guy like Christopher Bell. It took him forever just to get to that top 13. And then when he finally did, he was caught in a late race wreck there. That wasn't his own doing. So certainly a frustrating race, but I still think there were some good moments to it. So overall, for me, I gave it a slightly positive review. But we're not at Dover this week. We're in Kansas. That's right. We are in Kansas Speedway, a 1.5 mile track. People will say it's often like the sister track of Las Vegas. They're both 1.5 mile tracks. Las Vegas has consistent 20-degree banking, whereas Kansas has that variable banking from 17 to 20 degrees. So you get, at least I'm kind of giving the preview here of what we were going to talk about, but you get a little bit more multi-groove racing at Kansas Speedway than you do at Las Vegas because of the variable 17 to 20 degree banking. So Kansas ends up producing some of the most exciting races that we have seen in the next gen car. Stevie, I'm sure you're feeling similar thoughts for that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kansas has been the best track for the next gen car just in general. Yep. So, I mean, this is a race as a fan, you're super excited. It's been a race where the speed has come from Toyota. So, like, handicapping it, we should be able to do that and predict what's going to happen here. So, I like the racing at Kansas. I always have. I think it's a fast intermediate where, you could see 2 or 3 grooves and you could see people searching around for grip with any car that we've had there. And like the next gen car has just been phenomenal. So I am very excited. Like, I know I was kind of down on Dover, but I'm very excited for Kansas this weekend.
Yeah, I'm super excited for Kansas. One thing about Kansas, when I was going through the data, if we look at the 4 races in the next gen era, every single race between 8 and 11 cautions. Now, we get the 2-stage cautions, but that means 6, 7, 8, or 9 cautions we've typically can expect just for incidents or things happening at Kansas. So that produces some variance, produces a little bit of randomness, and we get some restarts, things get jumbled up, and we can see some surprise names pop into the top 10, the top 5. So it does behoove us a little bit to consider maybe a little bit longer shots and not necessarily just play the favorites. But at the same time, it's a mile and a half. It's where the best cars do shine. And as we have seen, Toyota, especially with some Hendrick Motorsports, has been the best at Kansas in the next gen era. But any other ways we are handicapping Kansas? Is it anything on pit road? Is it other similar tracks? Is it any other little intangibles here?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could look at Vegas, maybe look at a little bit of Charlotte. I mean, I don't necessarily love looking at Texas, even though like it's a higher speed intermediate. Like Texas is such a one groove racetrack now that it's so hard to comp those two together because like you can have fast cars kind of stuck behind cars that are not as good. So I really like Vegas, and you wouldn't like really think Kansas, Vegas, they're not like very similar in that aspect, but I mean, they comp really well together. So, and I don't mind Charlotte from time to time, but Charlotte's a 600-mile race. It's such a different race in itself too. So, I mean, I'm kind of looking at Kansas. I'm looking at like who's been fast here, and like looking at who's been fast this season on intermediates is fine. But I mean, we had Vegas and we've had Texas. So when we come back later this year, we'll have a lot more data, and it's probably going to point us to the same stuff because the guys that have been fast at Kansas have been the guys that have been fast in all 4 races.
Yeah, I agree with that. I will say, and I guess it's a little bit tooting my own horn, but my flags metric is what I really like to use if I am pulling in data from Texas, because you're right. Texas is a one groove track. So if you get track position, you'll be in a good spot, but flags adjust for that. It adjusts for track position. And it adjusts for strategy. So if you're on better tires than somebody else, it adjusts for that, and adjusts for healthy car count, all those kinds of things. So it's a much better way of finding true speed. So if I am going to pull in Texas, I'm not going to be pulling in finishing position. I'm not going to be pulling in average running position even, because that gets skewed by strategy. I'll be pulling in flags, which track position adjusts, that speed there. So I do think I'll use Texas just a little tiny bit, and when I do, I'll be using flags from that. But other than that, you're right. Mostly Kansas, a little bit, a decent amount of Las Vegas, I would say, obviously, as it's the closest comparable track, but a lot of Kansas history. So with that said, it is time to dive into some bets. As always, we are going to take you for a lap around Kansas. That's 4 turns, 1 pick from Stevie, 1 pick from myself in each turn before we drive into victory lane. So it is time to wave the green flag on the AdventHealth 400 at Kansas Speedway and dive into turn 1. All right, turn 1, Stevie. We just talked about it right at the top. This has been a Toyota track, and it looks like that's where you're going in turn 1.
Yeah, so I'm going to take Toyota race winner minus 105, and I think this is my first 2-unit bet of the year on the podcast. So I like this for 2 units. If you like to kind of equal it out, I bet 2.1 units because it's minus 105 and I want to win 2. So bet 2.1 to win 2 units. But really like Toyota this weekend. Why do I like Toyota? Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that they've been the best here. If we look at just overall speed, they rank 1st, 2nd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th. Like, okay, all right. If we don't want to just look at that, they've won 7 in the last 9 races here, including all 4 races with the next-gen car. We saw Kurt Busch absolutely dominate this race the first time we were here with the next-gen car.
Yep.
Bubba followed it up when we came back for the fall of that race. Obviously, Denny looked at some data, what Tony 311 was doing, and he was really fast last year in the first race. And then Tyler Reddick's like, hey, I want to win 2. So 2311 has won 3 of the last 4 races here. I'm going with Toyota. You got to beat Kyle Larson. I mean, Kyle Larson's going to be fast this weekend. He's fast at Kansas. He's fast at 1.5s in general. William Byron's going to be fast this weekend. So I think those are the 2 drivers that give Toyota the most trouble, like any late race variance potentially. But if we're just looking at raw metrics here, Toyota should be like minus 140. They are so much better than the field at Kansas with this next gen car.
Yeah, I agree with that. Now, this is funny because I don't technically have value on Toyota minus 105. I have them 48% to win the race, but that's because I think my model is overvaluing the Fords. I've talked about this, for example, on Green Dot Daily yesterday. I do think my model is overvaluing the Fords a little bit because it's hard to adjust really quickly early in the season, especially when we've only had 2 or 3, real intermediate track races. So my model's still borrowing in a lot of data from last year, a lot of track history where Ford was maybe even better than they were this year. So I do think I can get behind a minus 105 when I make that mental adjustment from my model. And I'm always willing to go against my model when, it makes sense. And I do think this is a spot it makes sense. So definitely like the Toyota race winner minus 105 for my turn one pick. Now, you mentioned Larson, Byron, and a whole bunch of Toyotas. Well, if I look at my top 9 cars, they're all Toyotas. They're Byron and they're Larson, with one exception, and that's Ryan Blaney. So I do have Ryan Blaney top 10 minus 125 as my pick for turn one. And I think he's just underpriced this week. Even knowing my model is, probably a little too high on Ford, I still have plenty of wiggle room here. I have him about 59% top 10 rate in my model. So this should be more like minus 140. So definitely like minus 125. Look, Ryan Blaney finished third at Las Vegas earlier this year. So even though Ford is down, Blaney has still been performing. He led laps at Texas. He led laps at Dover. So in those higher speed intermediate package races, I'm not really counting Bristol because it's very, very different beast. But in the higher speed intermediate package races, Ryan Blaney has still performed well this year. So I'm going to take him top 10 minus 125 as kind of the interloper to this Toyota and Hendrick Motorsports party.
He'd be that guy, right? Like he's just the guy that's consistently good every single weekend, Shocking that he won the championship last year because he's just consistently good everywhere we go. So I never mind getting Blaney under like minus 140 for a top 10 at any racetrack. So I'm definitely showing value on this as well. I like this. And I mean, this is one of those ones where I don't think you necessarily want to wait because I don't know if you're going to get a better line unless he qualifies bad. But typically Ryan Blaney is pretty good in qualifying. So I mean, if we look at last year, he qualified 10th and 17th. If he qualified 17th, you might get a better line, but I mean, I don't think it's going to be much better.
Yeah, I agree with that. So I'm definitely taking now Ryan Blaney top 10 minus 125 and Stevie's turn one pick Toyota race winner minus 105. So one turn down, we got 3 to go. Let's roll the corner in turn 2. Okay, Stevie, turn 2. This is the Bubba Wallace turn. We're both going to be on Bubba here. What angle are you taking on him?
Everyone.
Yeah, exactly.
I am showing the most value with his top 10 or top 5 at plus 250. I think this number should be around like 170, and that's a lot of books have it in like the 170 to 190 range, but there are a couple value spots out there. So I really like Bubba Wallace just in general this week. He's been really fast with this next gen car at this racetrack. Obviously had an issue last year, but he has 2 top 5 finishes in the 4 races here with the next gen car. He ranks inside the top 6 in speed, and that's including the kind of non-speed that he had last year with the issues. So if we take that out, like he's a top 5 race car here. So I don't know if it's like this chassis and what's working here, like because Kurt was so good and then Bubba was so good. But I mean, after watching Reddick being so good, Bubba needs that win this season. So if there's a good chassis floating around that 2311 shop, it's definitely going to be with that 23 car this weekend. So listen, all the joking aside, this is a really good racetrack for him. And shockingly enough, like Bubba's been really good on 1.5s with the next gen car. So I think this is a great spot for Bubba Wallace's top 5 at plus 250.
Yeah, totally agree with all of that. And I'm just going to go right into my turn 2 pick. I have Bubba Wallace plus 105 over Chase Elliott. If you're in the Action Network Discord, I gave this out at plus 115 earlier in the week in the Discord. Still like it at plus 105. I have Bubba Wallace favored over Chase Elliott I would say pretty significantly. So if you can get minus 105, I'm fine with that, but I definitely prefer plus 105. But if you only have minus 105 available to you, that is totally fine too. And you mentioned it. I mean, all the stuff here. Bubba Wallace has run inside the top 5 twice. He has a win here. If he's going to get, he'll probably get the good chassis, kind of like we've seen with Trackhouse Racing at times where they give the good chassis to the driver that needs it at various road course races. But yeah, I think Bubba Wallace over Chase Elliott, he should definitely be favored over Chase Elliott. So I don't mind taking minus 105. That does imply in terms of implied odds that you'd need to win more than 50% of the time. But I do have him well over 50% to finish ahead of Chase Elliott. And look, Chase Elliott is good here too. I'm definitely not discounting Chase Elliott. In fact, if we look at my flags metric from last year, Kansas #1, Bubba Wallace was 6th in flags, track position adjusted flags. Chase Elliott was 7th. So Bubba only 1 spot ahead of Chase Elliott, but it was a pretty big gap between 6th and 7th. When we look at like tiers, the top tier was Denny Hamlin and Martin Truex Jr. The next tier was Larson, Bell, Gibbs, and Bubba. And then Chase Elliott starts the next tier there. And that was at Kansas 1. At Kansas 2, Bubba Wallace also better than Chase Elliott by an even bigger margin there. So I'm going to take Bubba Wallace, who's faster than Chase Elliott at Kansas.
If we look at the 2 races that neither one of them had any issues, Bubba was faster and beat him in both races. Bubba's beat him in 3 of 4. The 2 races that they had issues, they split 1-1. But if we look at the 2 races at Kansas where there's been no issues, Bubba's been clearly the better of the 2. Chase has been better this season, not better than Bubba, but just better in general. I think that Chase Elliott's come a long way. I still think that there's some potential for him to be lagging on 1.5s. So I like this a lot. Bubba over Chase is something I would bet as well.
Yeah, and Chase Elliott struggled a little bit at Las Vegas, as did Bubba. I mean, Bubba had a better car than Chase at Las Vegas, but Bubba had encountered a lot of issues in the race. But Chase just wasn't as quick as Bubba at Las Vegas earlier this year. And I think a lot of, Chase Elliott's recent resurgence has been good tracks for him. Richmond and Martinsville are shorter, flatter tracks, which he's always been great at. And Dover has been one of his best tracks of his career, arguably his best track. He won Texas, but he didn't have the best car. In fact, he wasn't even a top 20 car for the first portion of that race until he benefited from one of those cautions where he stayed out long and then finally had track position in the rest of the race. And so he was fine at Texas, but I think that's a little overblown because it was a track position game and it was an attrition game, 16 cautions at Texas, and Elliott just kind of survived in one, had some good circumstances there. So I don't think that's necessarily representative of his speed here at Kansas, nor do I think Las Vegas. Well, I do think Las Vegas will be more representative of his speed, and it wasn't as good. So turn 2 is the Bubba Wallace turn. We're going to head down the backstretch toward turn 3. But before we get there, I want to remind you all, Running Hot is presented by BetMGM. Use bonus code ACTION when signing up to get up to $1,500 back in bonus bets if your first bet does not win. For new users in Arizona, Colorado, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kentucky, Louisiana, Maryland, Massachusetts, Michigan, New Jersey, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Virginia, West Virginia, and Wyoming. Bonus code ACTION will give new users in North Carolina $150 in bonus bets for betting just $5. Terms and conditions apply. Must be 21 or older. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Okay, 2 turns down, 2 turns to go. We're going to dive into turn 3. Okay, Stevie, let's start the second half of this lap off right. Where are you going for your third bet?
Well, you said started off right, so let's go over to BetMGM and get Christopher Bell here at 11-1. You were able to grab this number a little bit better when it first dropped. It's moved a little bit. I still like it. If you can get it anywhere like better than 10-1, I like it because Bell's just being undervalued because of his finishes. It's not the speed, it's the finishes. He's been undervalued here. 5th, 3rd, 36th, and 8th, but he ranks 2nd in speed behind Denny Hamlin at Kansas with the next gen car. So, I mean, this is a guy you're getting at double digits when realistically he should be just right up there with like Hamlin and Larson speed wise. So I like Bell. again, I've talked about this a lot this year on the podcast, but his pit crew has been phenomenal this year. And that was a huge thing for them last year. I feel like anytime you're going to get Bell at a track that's going to have multiple grooves, him and Larson are just so good at like searching around and finding grip and going faster. So, I mean, that's why Tyler Reddick is good here, because he's really good at that as well. So, getting Bell at double digits is just value to me. And I know like it's not going to necessarily show a ton of value finish wise, but if we just look at the raw speed, it's there. So I like him at 11-1 on BetMGM.
Yep, 100% with you. I took Bell right at the open here in Nevada at 14-1. So obviously I'm not adding extra at 11-1, but definitely like this one as well, right there with you. And I mentioned my flags metric in that first Vegas race last year, first Kansas race last year, which this is the first Kansas race again. It was fourth in flags, fourth. So he definitely is priced a little bit too long, in my opinion. So Christopher Bell, 11-1 at BetMGM is Stevie's bet. For my turn 3 pick, I've got 2 picks, but it's kind of the same. It's the same thing. So I'm going to the group with Martin Truex Jr., Christopher Bell, Chase Elliott, and Bubba Wallace. And what I'm doing is I'm betting 2 drivers from this group. I'm betting Martin Truex Jr. to win the group, and I'm betting Bubba Wallace to win the group. So Truex is plus 220 to win the group. Bubba Wallace is 4-1 to win this group. And I'm betting a total of 2 units. I'm splitting it 1.22 on Martin Truex Jr. and 0.78 on Bubba Wallace for the units. And what that'll do is if either one of these drivers wins, I will profit about 1.9 units. So it's risking 2 units to win 1.9 essentially if either one of these drivers wins this group. And these are the 2 I'm showing value on. So while I do like Christopher Bell, and I did bet him to win, and that's a great hedge to this group, if Bell wins the race, I'm still profiting, and even though I'm losing my 2 units from this group because I put a unit on him at 14-1 to win the race, I would still profit now if Bubba Wallace or Martin Truex Jr. win this group. And I have Truex winning this group 34, just under 35% of the time, which would make plus 187 fair. And I have Bubba Wallace winning this group 23.2% of the time, which make around plus 330, plus 335 as fair value. So 4-1, definitely nice value on Bubba Wallace. And we talked about it. I mean, Bubba's a top 5 car here when he doesn't run into issues. He runs better than Chase Elliott here. He runs about equal to Christopher Bell here. And in fact, my model has this group of Bell and Bubba Wallace basically the same odds here to win this group. And then it has Truex favored. And what I really think is going on here is it's just the group, the price is overvaluing Chase Elliott. And it's what, that does is Truex ends up being the value and Bubba Wallace ends up being the value because Bell and Bubba are about the same, but the actual price in terms of the group itself is Christopher Bell's plus 230, right? I have him about the same as Bubba. Like they're about the average car in this group. Truex certainly should be the favorite and Elliott should certainly be 4th. And the average car should be about 3-1. So I have Bell and Bubba about 3-1 is fair, right? Like plus 330. So it's just price strong. So Truex is a little value. I have him around plus 185, plus 190 is fair. And we're getting plus 220. And Bubba Wallace, like I said, I have plus 330. 4-1 is fair. So just a little bit of imbalance here, I think, because books are overvaluing Chase Elliott.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if it feels like it, but I'm not picking on Chase Elliott on purpose, but no. He's in a group with a bunch of Toyotas, and there's a bunch of good bets and head-to-heads against some Toyotas, and like I just value the Toyotas way more than I value Chase Elliott. I mean, like Truex is going to be fast, Bubba's going to be fast, Bell's going to be fast. I mean, Chase Elliott should be the 4-1 person in this group, if anything. I mean, I'm with you on this. I like how you structured the bet to make money getting 2 of the 4, and I think that is the only way you can do this because I really do think it's kind of a coin flip between Bubba and Martin Truex, and I have Bell up there too. But like you said, we've bet Bell to win the race, so like we're okay if Bell wins too because we probably end up making more money if Bell wins on our outright bet.
Exactly. So just one of those spots where, each individual bet, the Bubba and the Truex bets make sense here. it goes against my Bell to win bet. My Bell to win bet goes against this group, but all these different markets, you kind of just have to bet the value. And so if Bell 14-1 to win or 11-1 to win is value, and then you've got value in this group, you just got to bet it and structure your bet sizes right. So you still have a good chance at making some money. But that is turn 3, Stevie. Christopher Bell to win 11-1 at BetMGM. And I got those 2 group picks with Martin Truex Jr. and Bubba Wallace in a group with Bell and Elliott. So we are through 3 turns. We have 1 turn to go, and that's turn 4. All right, turn 4, Stevie. Final turn. You're going back to Christopher Bell, and we're once again intentionally picking on Chase. No, I'm just kidding. But it looks like you got a Bell versus Elliott matchup here.
Yeah, I'm going to take Bell over Chase Elliott minus 105. I'm showing this at like minus 135 as like where I'd bet it to. So big value at minus 105 here. I mean, in every metric outside of finishing position, Bell has crushed Chase Elliott at Kansas. Speed-wise, like I said, Bell is second in speed. Chase Elliott's like in the like 9 to 12 range as far as speed. But, I mean, when you're looking at probability of who's going to be faster, you definitely got to give Bell the edge. And it's just like, again, Bell, his pit crew cost him so many races last year, and I hate to say it, but that's really what it was. I mean, Bell easily could have won 5+ races last year had he not had some pit road issues. But, I mean, this is one of those things where if you're looking at finishing position, Chase Elliott looks good. He's beat him in 2 of 4. But if we look at speed, it's not even close. Bell has been way faster than Chase Elliott at Kansas.
Yep, 100%. I mean, this is, like I said, I have Bell and Bubba basically the same in my model. And if I like Bubba minus 105 over Elliott, I like Bell minus 105 over Chase Elliott. As simple as that. So we're going to wrap it up here with my turn 4 pick. And I waffled on what I was going to put in turn 4. I initially had, Ross Chastain to win the championship. I bet it 30-1 earlier in the week. I still like 25-1. So if you want to throw that out as a little bonus bet, I do like that because Ross at Phoenix is hard to beat. And if he gets there, it's a good shot to win the championship. But my official turn 4 pick, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch to finish as the top Chevy, 12-1 at BetMGM. And this is interesting because my model has 12-1 exactly as fair value on Kyle Busch. But I do think my model, just like it's overrating the Fords, I think it's underrating Busch specifically just because he's had some bad luck that's kind of hard to capture in data itself. So Rowdy, he was the 4th best Chevy in both Kansas races last year per my flags metric, but he's priced as the 6th Chevy. So I think that's one piece of evidence. Earlier this year, he led Las Vegas on pure speed, took the lead and led 18 laps before encountering issues, speeding penalties, things like that. Finished 3rd at Vegas 2 last year, 7th at Kansas 2 last year, and at Kansas 1 last year. So this very race last year, he was running 5th. And then a caution came out for Christopher Bell really late in stage 2. Kyle Busch came in the pit to get fresh tires, so he'd have him for the start of stage 3. But he was running 5th prior to that caution, so he came back out mid-pack and then was just caught in the swarm on that restart with 3 to go in stage 2 and ended up wrecked there. But he was a top 5 car at Kansas 1 when he wrecked, I should say. I shouldn't necessarily say a top 5 car, but he was running 5th. I think I had him 8th in flags at Kansas 1. No, I had him 10th at flags, track position Justin flags at Kansas 1. But you get the idea. A guy who's running 10th or 5th, 7th, 3rd, leading at Vegas earlier this year at Kansas and its most similar track, Las Vegas. 12-1 is probably just a little bit too long for top Chevy. Now, we always have to contend with Larson, Byron, etc. But if something happens, and Kansas can get a little wild, as we talked about, 8 to 11 cautions in every single Kansas next gen race. If that happens and it involves a Kyle Larson or a William Byron, or just we get some late restarts and he's kind of near the front and he makes a move around these guys on a late restart, that's an avenue to winning top Chevy here, even if he isn't the fastest Chevy. So Kyle Busch, top Chevy, 12-1 at BetMGM. What do you think, Stevie?
Yeah, so I like this as a top Chevy bet for sure. So it was a really positive sign to see Kyle Busch have speed last weekend. I know Dover is nothing that we're looking at but it was the intermediate package, and they had speed, and that's great for Kyle Busch because it's kind of been start the season really strong, kind of go through a lull, and now like getting some speed at Dover, goes to Kansas where he has 2 career wins at, and this is a good racetrack for him just in general. So again, Kyle Busch he's always in the mix. He's going to be fast. He's going to make the car better throughout the race. He's really good at telling the crew what he needs. He does it complainingly sometimes, but he's really good at telling them what he needs. And again, the variance is something you got to play. I have a quick question for you, and it's more of like, do you think we should be betting Austin Hill's top 10 like this weekend in an RCR car? He's gonna be solid, and you're getting it at anywhere from I saw it at 15, almost 16-1. Like I'm like right on the verge of like, do I bet this kind of thing? And I was curious.
Do you want my real opinion? No.
Yeah, I want to know your like honest thoughts.
And I think my model's too low. I talked to our friend Jim Sonis. His model does show value on that. Mine does not. I have 3.5% top 10 on Austin Hill. And here's why. When he ran in the RCR car at Michigan a couple years ago, 2022, I believe it was, he wasn't good. He finished 18th, I think, but he wasn't good. He was about the 28th, 29th, 27th best car. And that's while his teammates were much better than him. Both Austin Dillon and Tyler Reddick, when Reddick was back at RCR, were top 12, top 8 cars. And so if you're 28th and they're top 8, that is a huge discrepancy. And then I look at Austin Hill earlier this year and kind of similar stuff. He just wasn't great. Now, again, this is all in RCR equipment. And I know he DNF'd to Texas, but he got track position. He was in the 30s. The whole race was one of those that benefited from that early, like staying out really long. And then he had a restart where he restarted second on relatively fresh tires, where he put up his fastest lap of the race. And if you take each driver's fastest lap, his was still only 24th best. So if you put it where it should be, which is more in the middle of the pack, that never even would have been 24th best. It probably would have been in the 30s. So no, I do not have value on Austin Hill top 10.
And for what it's worth, I'm not showing value either. I'm just like, my mental state is like, it's an RCR car that's not running for points and can be very aggressive strategy wise at Kansas, where we have a ton of variance. Like, he could run long and you could get a caution, and he could be like Daniel Hemrick last week, who had a 20th place car.
Yeah, but it's going to be so much easier to pass him at Kansas than at Texas.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, and like Dover, like Daniel Hemrick wasn't good, but you couldn't pass him, and goes back to my point that Dover was just anyway. I don't need to rant, but yeah, I mean, I was really just genuinely interested, and why not do it on while we're live, and instead of asking you after the podcast.
We may have spun ourselves out crossing the start finish line, but hey, we completed the lap of Kansas. That means there's one thing left to do and drive into victory lane. Stevie, we're both on this. This was one of my first bets of the week. What do we have for victory lane?
I said to myself, like to finish last week, like on Sunday night, I said to myself, if any Toyota from 2311 or Joe Gibbs Racing opens at 15-1 or better, I'm betting it. Like, just not even looking at the stats. If any Joe Gibbs or 2311 car opens at 15-1 or better, I'm betting it. Ty Gibbs is 16-1 right now. We're both on this. We know the speed is there. This is the perfect racetrack for Ty Gibbs to get his first win, a 1.5 where Joe Gibbs has had a lot of speed. He was really fast here. The first race last year had some stuff go down. That's been like the MO, right? Like he's had speed and it just had stuff. One of these races is all going to click, and Kansas is the best track for that to kind of happen. And hopefully the variance is on his side this time. But again, we're getting a JGR car at 16-1. And this is a guy, again, we talk about it all the time. He is going to be a talent that we talk about for the next 15 to 20 years. Like, he is a generational talent, and he has one of the best backings in the world with, Joe Gibbs Racing. So give me Ty Gibbs at 16-1, and I know you're on this one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I bet it right when it opened 18-1 here in Nevada. And he even opened 20-1 at some places. So certainly bet down, but you're right. 15-1 or longer. You got to bet Ty Gibbs. He was a top 5 car at Las Vegas earlier this year. And I think he could be even better given how, while Toyota is very good at both Vegas and Kansas is even more their playground than Vegas. Yeah. So I definitely think Ty Gibbs to win. Great value given how fast he was at Vegas and how good he's been this year, and just overall much improved in his third kind of full-time season, second and a half, right? Because he had half a season filling in for Kurt Busch, who was a Kansas winner. So he was filling in for Kurt Busch 2 years ago in that 2311 car. And now with Joe Gibbs Racing, Ty Gibbs is our victory lane pick. So that is going to do it for us. Thank you for listening to the AdventHealth 400 episode of Running Hot, Action Network's motorsports betting podcast. We'll be back this time next week as we talk bets for the Goodyear 400 at one of our favorite racetracks, Darlington Raceway. On behalf of my co-host, Stephen Young, thanks again for listening. And we'll see you back next week on Running Hot from Action Network.